Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Where we left off was right at the end of the 10th chapter of the book of Exodus. So we're on chapter 11, verse 1. I'll read the last verse to get us going. Is the sound okay, Larry? Diane, can you hear us? Yeah? Okay. We're on the precipice of the 10th plague. It takes a long time to happen. You may remember from previous times just reading through this that the 10th plague is going to be kind of described in chapter 11. Then we're going to get a pause in chapter 12 for the laws of Rosh Chodesh and the Jewish calendar, HaChodesh Hazel Lachem, and then back to the story and some more laws in 13. So we're used to the plagues being announced with or without warning, implemented and cleared in a couple of verses. The 10th plague is the exact Exodus story, and it takes longer to unfold. But let's just remember how the last chapter ended. Will be the last two verses of chapter 10, just to get the momentum. Vayomer lo Pharaoh. Pharaoh said back to him, Lech me'alai. Thanks, Raul. Appreciate it. Lech me'alai. Leave from my presence. Hisham elachaba, wash yourself. Al tosef ra'ot panai. Don't. You're not going to continue to see my face. Ki v'yom ra'ot panai tamut. When you see my face, he's threatening. Let's stand because the Torah is standing. We shall just stand for a second while the Torah is being lifted. Sorry, Zoomers. The Torah is being lifted in this room, so we're just standing for a second. Is that a good press for them? Thank you very much. Barry, can you move your chair? I need one more. So on the day that you will see my face, you will die. And then Moshe responds back, Moshe, King Dibarta, you've spoken appropriately. Lo osif od ra'od panecha. You're not going to see my face again. Wink, wink. We discussed in the Rashi, other commentaries, that this is either Moshe being entirely just polite in the response, or kind of a threatening. You don't know how right you are that you're no longer going to see my face, because obviously Moshe knows the 10th plague is coming, but he doesn't. That's where we left things off, and now we're chapter 11, verse 1. Okay. Elon, do you want to read? Do you have a mic in front of you?
Vayomer Adonai el Moshe od nega echad avi al Paro ve'al Mitzrayim. Acharei chen yishlach etchem mizeh kishalchu kala garesh yigaresh etchem mizeh.
Okay, see what you can do to translate that.
And God said to Moses, one more plague will I bring upon Pharaoh and Egypt. After that, he will send you from here.
We're going to rise one more time while the Torah is being lifted. Thank you very much.
Thank you for carrying it so carefully.
Thank you.
It's cold out. The Torah gets a blanket. Yeah.
Okay, so one more play I'm going to bring upon you afterwards.
After that he will send you out,
That's a really hard two-word phrase. Kishalcho kala, right? The root of kishalcho is shalach. Has something to do with sending.
So he will, but is it send again, or is it?
Hard to know. It's a very hard phrase to translate. The kin can mean as or like. It could also imply like it could be a shortening of kasher, when in his sending you out, something like that. And kala can mean a lot of different things. What are the possibilities for what kala can mean? Everything. Kol. What else can kala mean?
Bride.
Yes, I didn't even think about that.
Easy.
With a kuf. With a kuf. It can also mean destroy, right? It can also mean destruction. In fact, before, I know we're just mid-translating, but I want to show you why this is hard to translate. I want to connect you to one of many verses where this root means something different than all or everything. So I'm going to share the screen. Okay, so this is on the precipice of when God is going to come down and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So verse 20 in that chapter, Vayom Adonai, God said, Za'akat Sodom v'Amorah ki rabah, the cries of Sodom and Gomorrah are great, v'chatatam, their sins, ki chavda ma'od, they're very grievous, Erdana, I'm going to go down, ve'ere, I'm going to see, ha, whether or not, ketza'akata ba'alai, if their cries reach me, asu, if that's what happens, most people read that word kala as then destruction. They're done for. Like it's really the same idea because it means complete destruction, but it has the notion of being eliminated, right? So if we import that into our verse, is Pharaoh saying, is Moses saying, is God saying, when Moses sends you out, God, what am I? Can't think straight there. When Pharaoh sends you out, kishalcho, when he sends you out, kala, there's going to be destruction. That's a possibility. Or is it something more in our verse, kishalcho kala, when Pharaoh sends you out, it's going to be kol. It's going to be a complete sending out. It's not clear which one it means. Finish the phrase, Ilan, garesh, garesh.
So he will force, but he forces you and will force. It's not
right. It's a doubling. It's just like v'haya'im Shemot tishma'u. We often in old English translations, this is where the word verily would come out, right? That if you verily listen to my commandments, he will verily dispatch you, expel you from this place, right? It's a doubling of the verb form to suggest an intensify.
So the fact that the tenses are different is not relevant?
Well, it's relevant, but that's the way that is constructed. In the same way that shamoa tishma'u, in the phrase vaya'im shamoa tishma'u, the tishma'u is the actual verb form. You will listen. The shamoa, I forgot the exact name of the form, is a static form that is used before the actual verb to express an intensifying. So here, the verb is yigaresh. He will expel you. The garesh here is not a command imperative. You must expel. It's just the form of the verb that you put before the verb when you're the Bible and you're intensifying a verb. I forgot the name of it. Okay, so we have a basic sense of what's going on, right? God is introducing to Moses the 10th plague, and he's promising that Pharaoh's going to send them out. And then there's this question of what's kishalcho kala mean, and what are we learning extra with the last four words of the verse, garesh yigaresh etchem mizeh, he will surely expel you from here, that we didn't learn from the phrase just before that, acharei chen yishalech etchem mizeh. After this, he will send you from there. So those are some of the issues and problems in the verse. I see Norm's hand and I saw Rick's hand.
I think God is telling Moshe that Pharaoh will not merely let them go. He's going to completely drive the entire people out, confiscate anything that's left. They'll be gone, and those that don't leave may be destroyed.
Aha. So up until now, God's saying to Moshe, you've been begging Pharaoh to let more out than Pharaoh was willing to. You wanted the women and the children and the cattle, and Pharaoh put limitations on who he's letting out. Now, after this one, not only is he going to let you out, he's thrusting you out. He'll want none of you. And are you suggesting that the word kala there is hinting at potential doom to Israelites, danger to Israelites who stay, or are you reading it more of a complete expulsion?
I think both, really, because certainly we know that there are some that didn't leave, didn't want to leave, and ended up, the Egyptians were okay with them not leaving.
Yeah.
In the Bird's Head Haggadah, there are a couple of Bird's Head people that are in chariots with the Egyptians, and it was a big controversy for a very, very long time. And I learned, must be 10 or 15 years ago at this point, maybe 20, there was some scholar dealing with this, and his children, who were just ordinary day school students looking and said, "Oh, that's obviously." Their names escape me. Not Avinoam. Aviram and
Datan and Aviram.
Datan and Aviram. Yeah, that was being depicted, and that's become the accepted understanding of those two characters.
Rick.
Hi. I have a trope drash and a trope question. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, let me just deal with the sentence first. So, looking at it trope-wise, you got two clauses, you have two phrases, and they both end in mizeh, right? The first one, Yishalach echem mizeh, and the second one, Yigaresh echem mizeh. So, just on face value of it, there's two groups. Then there's a Zakef Gadol on Acharechen, there's Zakef Gadol on Kala. That's very rare. You get two Zakef Gadols in the same sentence. And that comes to stand alone. It's one of those that doesn't, it's not coupled with other trope. It stands alone. So to me, it strikes me as the mixed multitude. There's the Israelites, and then there's the mixed multitude of Egyptians and Libyans and other people who want to get out. So,
did you say Libyans?
Yeah.
How did Libyans get there?
Because the Egyptians always would fight with the Libyans. I don't know if they were. Yeah, I think that Lubia. I think they were called that. I defer to Leonard on all the peoples of the early world, but yeah, the Egyptians fought people on both sides and took slaves from everywhere. Nubians from down below,
okay,
or upper Nile. Anyway, so those speak to me. And then I wanted to ask you about what Rashi says about kala, the word there. I see a trope there, a legamre.
Yeah, we're gonna. I'll answer that when we read the Rashi.
Okay.
You knew that was coming.
So yeah. So I mean, it's redundant otherwise. Why is it saying mizeh twice, driving you out twice? There's two groups of people. Yeah. So there you go.
Either it's two groups of people, or as Norm said, it's not only God promising that Pharaoh will send you out the way you had requested, but he's actually going to force you out. The mizeh is interesting because we hit this problem every single time we try to translate. In modern Hebrew, we wouldn't say mizeh, we'd say mikan, from here. We wouldn't say from this. This doesn't refer to a place, right? So, but zeh, the word zeh means this. Clearly, the meaning of the phrase is he's going to send you from here, but it doesn't say from here. It says from this place, from this situation, from this circumstance. I'd be interested if any of the translations of the verse actually deal with the word zeh there as opposed to a word that has to do with location. I see Larry and Diane's hand.
Yes. So first, my question, I apologize. I was dealing with
Larry, speak up a little bit because there's air blowing in this room. It's making us hard to hear through the microphone. Just try to project more.
Okay, can you hear me better?
Yeah.
All right. I was dealing with Izzy, so I wasn't paying 100% attention. When you were dealing with the word kala, did you relate it to the v'yachal in the paragraph that we recited before the Kiddush and on Friday night?
We didn't use that exact verse, but we said there are two possible ways of understanding what the root is. Either it's from the root from which v'yachal means, which means complete, utter, right, total, or it's from the root that means to destroy, to eliminate.
Right. Okay. That's
same root, but different meaning of that root. Correct.
Right. So it would seem to me the translation should be something like completed. Did you want to hear other translations?
Sure.
Of the verse?
Particularly if they're interesting.
I apologize. I haven't looked at them, so you'll decide.
Okay.
Kaplan says, God said to Moses, "There is one more plague that I will send against Pharaoh and Egypt, after that, he will let you leave this place. When he lets you leave, he will actually drive you out of here.
That's the kala. He will drive you out. Yeah. Oh no, is that the end of his translation?
Yeah, that's it.
So he actually doesn't deal with a kala. He just connects the kishalcho to the garesh. He lets you leave. He's really forcing you to leave. He's not letting you, he's forcing you.
Yeah.
That's Aryeh Kaplan?
Yeah. Alter says, and the Lord said to Moses, yet one more plague shall I bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward, he will send you off from here. When he sends you off altogether, that's the kala, he will surely drive you out from here. And that's it.
Altogether. So meaning it's going to be, there's not one of you left. I'll share with you how Everett Fox translates it. God said to Moses, I will cause one more blow to come upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward, he will send you free from here. So far, everyone's translating the mizeh as meaning from here. When he sends you free, kishalcho kala, it's finished. Meaning this whole ordeal is done. Not that he's sending you out completely. Not that it doesn't mean that, but the kala means this whole thing is completed. He will drive, yes, drive. That's how Everett Fox does the verily. He will drive, yes, drive you out from here. I'll show you how Koren translates it. And the Lord said to Moses, no, that's the wrong verse. Or chapter 11, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes Safari does this. When you switch translations, it moves somewhere else in the text. And the Lord said to Moshe, yet will I bring one plague more upon Paro and upon Mitzrayim. Afterwards, he will let you go from here, Mizeh. And when he shall let you go, Kishalcha, he shall surely thrust you out altogether from here. Why that's interesting is that syntactically, against Trupp, Rick, who is this? This is Koren, is connecting the kala to the verb garesh, not as a standalone. The Trupp has us read it as kishalcho when he sends you out, kala, something it's going to be complete or it's the end or destruction. Koren reads it as kishalcho, kama, kala gareshi garesh chamizeh. He's going to completely send you out. It's an interesting read. We have no idea which one is right, but I always find it fascinating when a traditional translator reads the text against the grain or the rhythm of the Trupp.
I had one more question.
Yeah.
And again, apologies to Rick. I heard him talking about the mizeh. So Rick makes a point all the time of zeh, especially with regard to Noach, and I forget where else. But he's already written an entire book on zeh.
Larry, hold on one second. Is the sound coming out of the computer out there or a microphone or a speaker?
I think it's on.
I think it's out of the speaker overhead.
Everybody's mushy.
It's just the volume is very low. Is there a volume on the back of that?
There's a volume on the back of the speaker, but it's
on high.
I can remember which one it is.
All right, keep going. See if you can talk a little bit louder, Larry.
Okay. My only question is mizeh, here translated as from here. The word zeh, I don't think usually means here. It usually means this. So I'm just curious if zeh is elsewhere translated as here, a place, as opposed to a thing.
Yeah, we did discuss it. We did discuss that certainly in modern Hebrew, zeh only means this or that. It does not mean place. I don't see any translation that tries to render the zeh into an English version of this. Everyone is understanding it as taking the place of a word that would have meant here, which might mean that modern translators are just not tolerating translating it literally, or that back then zeh could also have meant here, right? It's hard to know where we are in that pickle.
So I just offer my very brief drash that maybe what God meant here was not to drive you out of this place, but this situation. Because the situation that they're in is the situation of going back and forth and conditional, etc. So enough of this, he will drive you out.
That's an honest possibility, given what the word zeh could mean, and it makes sense. And it's interesting that I don't know of a single. I'm not aware of a single translation that chooses to read it that way.
I got one.
The JPS also says from here.
Yeah, but the end of it.
Well, Rebbe.
Yeah. Yes, Rick.
My Silverman has hence twice, both times. So drive you out hence altogether. It will let you go hence. Old English word, but that's a timing thing, isn't it? From, like Larry was saying, from this time, from this point in time. Hence and HENCE isn't that a time thing from this time event?
I think hence can mean both time. I think it also can be a stand-in for
a place,
for here,
a physical place. Yeah, because Silverman has hence. Oh,
okay.
And can I add something on Vayechal since we were talking about Kala?
Yeah,
I hear Vayechal Moshe. That's in my head from somewhere that Moses finished. Is that the end of Deuteronomy, or is that some other place with Pharaoh that he finished talking?
He completed.
Yeah. Right. So it's a nice echo, the Kala here from Vayechal Moshe in another place, wherever that is.
Stevie?
Yeah, thanks.
Vayechal Moshe is in, I'm sure you're thinking of in Kitisa in the Torah reading we do for fast days and also for Shabbos Chol Hamoed. But what I was going to say is, in addition to the trope, connecting Kala with Garesh seems strange to me, because in the grammatical form where you have the same word repeated like that with the verb, I think that the way it works is that the structure allows for the second word to be modified by additional words, because it's sort of like on the topic of this, what then are you supposed to do is told. So you have v'nakeh lo yunakeh, right? That about remittance, you don't fully remit, and you have tzedek tirdof on the topic of justice. Justice needs to be actively pursued, not merely done, right? But most of the time, it's just repeated mot tumat, right? This person, should they die? Yes, they should die. But I can't think of any cases where the first iteration is the one that has like an additional word that would, adjust make it not a pure repetition. Maybe there are cases, but I at least can't think of any. So in addition to the trope, that's another sort of structural reason that it's awkward to.
I heard some of that. It's hard to hear on people on Zoom today in Whiteman for some reason. So if you're speaking on Zoom, please speak directly as close as you can to the microphone, whatever device you're using. So I heard most of that. I hope other people on your Zooms heard more of that. Elon.
So I'm wondering if there's a possibility that this is the reason for the repetition of the idea that they leave and then they're kicked out is kind of giving agency to Pharaoh, meaning it's not just that he's letting them go and doing nothing. He's forcing them out. He's actively forcing them out, almost as a face saving for him. Like, no. I wanted them out. I forced them out. I pushed them out. I don't know that the Torah really cares about giving Pharaoh a face saving opportunity, but maybe that's part of it.
It could. Remember, we're in the zone of God telling Moses what's going to happen, right? We're not yet in Pharaoh's head, but either the notion of Pharaoh being not just sholeach, sending, but gareshing, expelling, it either could be, as you suggested, giving him more agency. He's actually taking some control and not just yielding to the command, but actually taking charge, or he's so utterly defeated. He's so exasperated. He doesn't have the power, the strength to negotiate anymore. He's like, get out of here, right? And it's hard to know. My instinct tells me that the Torah is more interested in having the latter read. That doesn't mean we have to have that read, right? Come on in, Hector. Thanks, Hector. We're having a hard time getting the volume on the speaker high enough for us to hear the people on Zoom without getting feedback in the room. Thank you. Appreciate it. Barry, and then Rebecca, and then Norm.
So one possibility for mizeh would be this existence, from this existence. This existence will no longer be.
Yeah, similar to I think what Larry said before, perhaps that it's from this circumstance, from this situation. Larry, say something just so I see if Hector's corrected the audio. Just speak as if you're making a comment.
Okay, testing 1, 2, 3.
Keep going.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
One more.
Okay, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
This one goes to 11. I think that's a little bit better, right? You guys can hear him better? One more sentence.
Okay. Izzy is very interested in what the next thing we're going to say.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right, thanks. Okay, Barry.
I wanted to suggest less of this situation than your existence. The existence of the Yudim in Egypt will no longer be.
Right, the whole enterprise of slavery that you've been in the middle of.
Their existence will no longer be.
Whose existence?
The Israelites.
Good. Rebecca, then Norm.
I was going to comment on the word.
Mike.
I was going to comment on the word nega. So, yeah, one more plague. This seems like the first time that God uses that term and says, okay, there's one more plague. This is a plague. In the beginning of chapter 7, he used the words ototai and moftai.
Wonders and signs.
Yeah, that will be coming. And then during each plague, I don't really recall, and I quickly looked, that he says, okay, here's a plague, and Moshe doesn't use that term either. So there's something more significant about this one. And in looking up the word nega, it also has meanings of wound or mark. So it's maybe even more so a physical manifestation that we'll see.
Yeah, good. And with modern Hebrew, what does nogea mean? To touch. It's proximity. It's juxtaposition. It's not the first time that the Torah uses the word nega. We have it in Breshit several times when the situations where Avraham and then Isaac go down into Egypt and to Gerar, and the situation with the wives, and then the locals get plagued. The word nega appears there, but you may be right, it's the first time being used here. And in colloquial Judaism, which is not always quoting from the Torah, we don't refer to them as the Asara Negaim. We refer to them as the Eser Makot, from the word Makah, which is like an act of smiting or strike. So that's how, just Jew speak evolved, that we call them Eser Makot. That's rabbinic Hebrew. But here, you're right. For the first time in the story, God is using the vocabulary word nega, an intimate, physical, touching strike. Norm. And then we're going to read Rashi.
Since a couple of the translations used the term hence, one of them, two of them twice, I looked up hence. It can mean in the future, such as 2 days hence or 3 years hence,
right?
And it could also mean as a consequence, and doesn't necessarily mean both of those at once.
But it does. But can it also mean here, from here, like hence from here?
From here, I think it could mean.
Yeah. Joanna, Yentov's coming sooner for you than for us. So honored that you're a part of this.
It is indeed. Shall I tell you that while it was still Yontiv for you, I listened to your high holiday sermons because Yontiv was over for me. Don't let that get to your head or anything. What did I want to say? Oh, on the topic of touching, it's interesting that the last plague, Hoshech, with a different verb, there was a sense of touching, right? That it was a darkness, vaimash, that could be touched. Nice. And so it would be interesting to contrast, like, sort of the degree, what's the nuance and the difference between these two words that mean touching? Like, this is going to be an even worse kind of touching.
Yeah, very nice. I had forgotten that. Vayamesh choshech, we talked about how it's a palpability, like the word mashash or mamash, reality, and naga, right? If you live in the frum world and you have no physical contact with some of the opposite gender until you're married, you are shomer negia. You're watching your intimate touches, right? Very, very nice. It does seem to be that there are a lot of different ways of dividing these plagues. We talked about different categorizations. It does seem that the language of 9 and 10 is amped up compared to the 1 through 8, and then 10 certainly amped up from 9. Very nice. Okay, let's read Rashi. Ilan, I think you were on, and we'll get to Rick's point and question from before.
Kala, Gemira.
Okay, so the first thing Rashi does is acknowledge to us, the reader, that he knows that we know that this is a hard word to translate, and he's quoting something. Who's Rashi quoting when he gives a one-word translation? Onkelos. He says, if you, reader, are trying to figure out which sense of the word kala means, or as Leonard points out accurately, it's the same root either way, but a different sense, go to the Aramaic. Onkelos translates kala as gemira. Gemira is from the root gamar, which means finish, complete, all. It's not the sense of the word that means destruction. It's the sense of the word that means complete, comprehensive, okay? And then Rashi now he'll do a double translation. He translated the biblical kala into the Aramaic gemira using Onkelos, and now Rashi is going to retranslate the Aramaic Onkelos into, I guess, a contemporary early 11th century French-speaking Hebrew word that is going to be more understandable to his readers, which is Khalil, completely, right? Totally. Okay, go ahead.
He will send all of you.
He's going to send you all, right? So Rashi weighs in on the fact that, first of all, he disagrees with, was it Korin? The kala is not connected forward to the garesh. It's modifying the kashalcho. This time, when he sends you out, kala, it's going to be all of you, not a bride. And then what Rashi doesn't comment on, maybe considers it to be self-evident, is what then is the impact or the need of the last 4 words, right? If we followed Rashi's logical conclusion, we would say the first part of the phrase means when he sends you out, you're all going out. And it's not just that you're all going out in number. He's thrusting you out. He doesn't want anything to do with you anymore. So it's a totality of number, that's the kala, and a totality of intent by Pharaoh. He's done. He surrenders. He cries uncle. This is a prediction. He will surrender. He will cry uncle. He cries uncle as, oh. I wonder if Joel Elkins' hand is up to make that pun, because if he were in the room, he would have. So Sue, you get the Joel Elkins prize for today. He cries uncle is. Joel, were you going to make that pun? You should now say you would, because you'll get credit for it retroactively.
No, I give full credit to Susan. I've made that pun before. I don't think he disagrees with Koren so much, because you could translate it as he will send you out, and in his sending, he will force all of you out.
I agree that he doesn't disagree with how Koren thinks the verse in general should be understood, but since Rashi at the end reinforces the verb yishalach, kulchem yishalach or yishalech, it seems to me that Rashi thinks that kala is modifying the previous word, kisholcho, not the upcoming phrase, garesh. Yes, he agrees that what this means is that all of you are going to be dispatched completely. I just think the micro syntax that he thinks that kala is referring backwards to kisholcho, because he repeats that verb at the end of his comment, kulchem yishaleach. Rick.
Yeah, again, as I'm looking at it more, God didn't have to say all the part after the et nachta. It's all redundant. There's nothing new there. He said God says he's going to send you out, just like you've been asking. He send shalach et ami, send them out. But now on top of that, they're going to drive you out. So in my head, it's like Yul Brynner and the chariots actually chasing them out, but that's not the way it happened. They let them go for the 3-day thing, and they were passive. But then when they realized that they weren't coming back from the 3-day thing, then they went to go chase to recapture them. So I think God is predicting, they're not just going to send you out, they're going to send you out and then they're going to chase
That's
after
nice.
you. You like that?
I like that read. I like Garesh as anticipating that it's not going to be over when you leave, but that there's going to be we're going to further get you out to the edge of the border, and the drama is going to continue. And you're right, it's not just redundant; it's doubly redundant. It's from the department of Zidapment, because the Kishalcho Kala is redundant after God has says they're going to send you away, and the Garesh is redundant on that. So you're right, and I'm going to say you're right again to be evocative of
redundant. Yeah,
Larry Diane, and then Leonard. Larry Diane.
So the way in which we study, verse by verse, word by word, commentary by commentary, often makes it really hard to take the overall view.
Correct.
Above of what's going on. So I think I'm going to reserve the more detailed part of this comment for probably about a month or two till we get to maybe verses 4 or 6 or 8.
Oh, come on, you little faith. Yeah.
But this statement and then at least the next 2 verses and maybe the others are really difficult to place in any context. And Alter makes that point here as well. Moses is
context in the story.
Yeah.
Well, Rashi gets to that later on, but keep going.
Okay. Well, just so people understand, so we have it in mind. Moses seemingly had the last word when he said, "Rightly have you spoken, I will not see your face again." But indeed he does. He does. And it's not clear if this is simply a continuation. And what's happened is, as an aside, God takes Moses aside and says, "Here, Moses, by the way,"
good,
and then tells him what he tells him in verse 1, and then we'll get to it maybe later today or maybe next week. The weird thing that he starts to tell him in verse 2, which is completely not related to the Makkah itself. And the way I usually look at it, critical, biblical, whatever approach, is this is sort of throwing in a bunch of verses that were part of the various narratives to try to find a place for them. But we can talk more about it later on.
It's an excellent comment. You're anticipating really the right questions. If everyone just peeks at verse 4, we're not going to read it fully, but just to peek at it, it seems that verse 4, which interestingly, the Jews divide as an aliyah, right? There's an aliyah that ends at verse 3 and then begins at verse 4. There's also a parsha break in the columns. Vayomer Moshe ko amar Adonai kechatzot halayla ani yotzeh betoch Mitzrayim. God, Moses says, this is what God said in the middle of the night. I'm going to come into Egypt, and Moses is now announcing the coming of the 10th plague. Whom is he announcing it to? By supposition, no. I would think by supposition, this is the threat to the Egyptians, right? But as Larry's pointed out, it seems that his last encounter with Pharaoh was supposed to end. In fact, Pharaoh said, "I'm not going to see your face again." And Moshe said, "You're right." So is verse 4 beginning another interaction that puts a lie to the fact that they weren't going to see each face again? Or is it he hasn't yet left Pharaoh? Sometimes at the end of the plagues, we see Vayitzei Moshe ve'im Paro that Moses had left Pharaoh. He hasn't. We don't know. You're right. It's easier to try to resolve it from a biblical critical text weaving perspective than to fully meld it together midrashically. It's for a lot of scholars, these few verses are reminiscent of the problems in the story of Yosef being sold. It's very hard to make sense of the Ishmaelites and the what else they refer to? The Midianites and the sellers. They're referred to in several different ways. And when the German School of Biblical Criticism started to look at potential threads of text in the biblical story, they pounced on that chapter like, whoa, this looks like bad editing, and this chapter. And of course, the rabbis were certainly aware of that. They just tried to fuse it with their incredibly fertile midrashic mind. It's just hard to do. Barry.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I want to add something here. So
Please.
Maybe another way to think about this verse is that there's a subtext that I guess that's what Midrash is, that we don't see, which is that at this point in the story, Moses is going to God and saying, "Listen, they haven't let us go yet. there's no sign they're going to let us go at all. And God says, not only are they going to let you go, they're going to kick you out. And so it's maybe in response to a lack of faith that we don't see here, but could be.
That the reason why God is using such intensive language to Moses is to kind of chastise them for not believing it's going to actually happen.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's an interesting read also. Rick and Joel, your hands up again or still?
Again, because I wanted to answer what
I wasn't calling
who's
on you.
Moses.
I wasn't calling you. I was just asking if your hand was still up. So hold the thought. Otherwise, I would lower your hand easily.
All right,
Barry,
all right.
Leonard, and then Rick.
So, Rabbi, since you jump ahead, I take license.
Please.
Rashi saying that you could imagine Moshe has one of these ear things, like when you're on a stage and people are talking to you. So while he's in talking to Pharaoh, okay, and I won't see me, I won't see it again. At the same time, he's getting this prophecy from God's telling him this is going to happen.
And he's still in Pharaoh's presence,
but not saying it. He's getting the prophecy.
Good. Leonard, and then Rick.
All right, well, this is going back a ways over here. We were talking about things being repeated in here, being redundant, or perhaps being overly repetitiously redundant again.
Odapam, yeah.
Okay, so, but anyway, but the Garesh is not being redundant. It's just a typical grammatical form in biblical Hebrew. That's the infinitive absolute, like Shemot Tishma'u. It just means that you shall surely be banished or whatever.
Right. I wasn't saying that those two words internally to another are redundant, but the notion that Pharaoh is going to thrust them out is redundant after we've already learned he's going to send them out, and then he's going to send them out completely.
Right.
Yeah. Barry.
Just on that, by the way, the trope system there separates the two words. Garesh, Igaresh Etchem. They're separated.
Yes. That's interesting to point out that normally when you would have, what's the name of the form?
It's infinitive absolute.
Infinitive absolute. That normally the music of those two words would be in conjunctive tribe. Vahaya, im shamoa tishmu. Those two words go together. Very good to point out, Barry, that here it's more of a pause after half of that phrase. Garesh, they will verily. Yigaresh echem mizeh, expel you all from here.
Except that the tavir is a conjunctive tribe.
It is conjunctive technically in the sense that if there were it wouldn't initiate the ahoy taking out the dagesh of the bumaf. Musically, doesn't feel that way. Then again, we don't know exactly how it actually sounded back then. You're right. Technically, garesh is tavir is conjunctive.
No,
but you know that what I meant by that, right? Rick, are you on? Are you here, Rick?
Yeah. Yes, I'm here. Hi. The tavir is not conjunctive. It ends a phrase. It doesn't begin a phrase. Darga is conjunctive with tavir. Those two go together.
If you check with tavirs, when we're off screen, you'll see places where there are tavir words that end in an ahoy letter. That if it were disjunctive, it wouldn't remove the dagesh from the beged kefet beginning the next word, and sometimes it does. So sometimes technically within the trup and grammar system of biblical Hebrew, even though we sing it in such a way that it's disjunctive, sometimes it is conjunctive.
All right. Well,
and if it happens too much, it becomes conjunctivitis, and then it's a problem.
Yeah. Then it's a dangerous and messy situation.
Yes.
If you're into current events. But then, okay, so I wanted to respond to who's Moses talking to, right?
Yeah.
So verse 1, God's talking to Moses. I like the idea that Barry said about the microphone in the ear, but I don't think so. Verse 2, speak to the people. And then verse 4, Moses says, so I think Moses is talking to the people, and I don't think that he saw Pharaoh again. To disagree with Larry, maybe from afar as they're running away.
8.
Verse 8.
Verse 8 is still the same
Yeah.
I thought he was talking to the Israelites. He's telling them what's going to happen.
Look at verse 8.
And he went out from Pharaoh, okay, in fierceness and wrath.
That's not right, verse 8. All of your servants will come to me and bow down to me, begging. So it seems pretty clear that in this extended dialogue that Moshe is going to begin, he is communicating to Pharaoh and the Egyptians that the 10th plague is coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Joanna, and then we're going to move forward.
Well, I wanted to ask you about Legamre in the Rashi. There's a Munach Legamre. Is that the same as this Gemera?
Where do you see Legamre in the Rashi?
It's not. I'm just asking you. I know there's a Munach Legamre with the line after it that separates the phrase Munach Legamre and then a regular Munach and then the Revia. So this Gemera here, I was just asking about if from the Aramaic, if that relates to Munach Legamre.
You're
separated.
You're switching the resh and the mem. Legarme is the trub, not Legamre.
Okay, all right.
The trub you're referring to is Legarme.
Garme.
This is Gimel mem resh.
Right. Okay. Not at all. Okay.
Completely. Joanna.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So 2 things. I know this trope discussion may be getting a little technical for some people who are not as embedded in it, but just to make one final comment about it, if I have it right, the tipcha is considered to be a lower level the tavir is a lower level disjunctive than the tipcha. So another way of saying it is that while it's a minor disjunctive, that tavir is embedded within the larger tipcha phrase. And the other thing I wanted to make there, yes, indeed, there is a minor disjunctive there. And I think, therefore, Everett Fox has it right in his translation when he does it as follows. When he sends you free, it is finished. He will drive, yes, drive you out from here, with a comma after the first drive. And I think instead of saying something like surely drive, he's doing that to get at the trope.
Really nice, Joanna. I of course don't know if that's what Everett Fox was responding to, but that is a really elegant way of reading his comma responding to the very technical half conjunctive, half disjunctive aspect of the Tavir trup. That's really lovely.
He does that for
all of the absolute imperatives. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Let's go to the next verse. Yeah, that was a good verse. Whom have we not heard from yet? Matt, are you at a place where you can read?
Just a second. Shit. No.
Okay. Sue, do you want to read verse 2?
Okay. Daber na באוזני העם וישאלו איש מאת רעהו ואישה מאת רעותה כלי כסף וכלי זהב.
Okay.
And speak now in the ears of the people.
And who's speaking to whom in this phrase? Because we've jumped in and out of. God is telling to Moses, right? So this is still God's quotation marks to tell Moses.
I know in the ears is a little weird. It's like what, whisper to them? It seems weird to stick Oznei in there.
Yeah, occasionally the Torah will use that. Onkelos translate just as kadam ama, in the presence of the people, right? So Onkelos does not translate it as ears. He translates it more colloquially, or it's a phrase. Go ahead.
V'yishalu, and they'll ask.
Good.
Ish me'et re'ehu. Now I'm reading the translation. Each of them to their neighbor.
Right, like Re'ah here, like from the 6th Shever Bracha, Sameach Tesamach Re'im Ha'ahuvim, grant perfect joy to the beloved companions or friends. So a Reah is a friend. So each person will make this request from his Reah, from his peer.
And every woman of their womanly Re'ehu.
Good. And if you look over at Unkelus translates both the male Re'ehu and female Re'uta into the root Chaver. Chavrei, Chaverta, friend, partner, peer. Okay?
I like that better.
Okay.
Clay kesef uchle zahav, their silver and their gold.
Okay.
They're tools and vessels of silver and gold.
So this is one of several times where this notion that the Israelites are going to leave with back pay, as it were, right? I mean, it's actually, it's a conversation that society is still happening, right? How do you, and if so, how do you compensate freed slaves for their years of labor? It's on my mind right now. Javi, Lev, and I are now watching The West Wing, which I have not seen since I saw it for the first time through. Boy, does it hold up. It's so good. I wish I lived in the America of President Bartlett. But the episode we watched last night was when Josh Lyman, if you remember the character, has to have a meeting with someone that the Bartlett administration is putting up for nomination, not for the Supreme Court, but some lower federal judiciary position. Has to be, what's the word? Vetted and eventually approved. There's another word. Confirmed. Thank you. Goodness. And the man that they're putting up is a Black legal scholar who was quoted on a book jacket of a book written by someone else. It's a book that's trying to make, it's obviously a fictional book, making the case for reparations. And this person who's going to be put up for the position put a very complimentary comment on the book jacket suggesting he was in favor of reparations. And this is a conversation that's been happening in American society for a long time, never been fully determined what to do. And the number used, this was 1999, was that economists determined that the number that would make sense to be distributed to descendants of African-American slaves was $1.7 trillion. That would be a fair and conservative estimate for the labor that they did over those years, right? And so
current value of 40 acres in a mule.
that phrase is being used, right? So it's happening here too, right? So this is God telling Moses to tell the Israelites, you're not going to be granted reparations. You're going to take reparations, right? You're going to go, each guy is going to go to his male friend. That in and of itself is weird. Like, did these slaves have buddies in the Egyptian society? So maybe Rhea just means neighbor, but even that is strange. They live near them, right? And each woman's going to go to her and they're going to take. Shoel means to ask. It doesn't mean to claim. To ask silver stuff and gold stuff. This is Pharaoh. This is God telling Moses to tell them to do it. Later on Exodus night, we actually see it happen. Okay? Norm, Elon. Microphone.
Thank you. I think the concept of slavery is that it's not the case that, these weren't chattel slaves like existed in the American South and exist in some parts of the world to this day. This was a situation where the Israelites were forced to provide a certain amount of uncompensated labor as a community.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it is entirely likely that somebody who spent 2 weeks every quarter working on building pyramids would still have a life for the rest of their time when they worked and they bought and they sold and they did business with and perhaps socialized with various Egyptians at more or less their same social level. And so, yes, they might well have somebody who is a colleague in work or in friendship or in a club, so to speak. And so that's possible. And it's also possible even if somebody was their supervisor, that would be somebody that they could approach. It may be that the lowest slave wouldn't want to approach the master with a request, but the highest one might well.
Interesting. Elon, Larry, Diane, Rachel, Barry, end of class.
I just find the phraseology here very odd because I'm not quite sure that it really wasn't a more traditional master-slave relationship between the Egyptians and the Israelites, and to suggest that you're talking to a friend, and even more than that, it's not even like you're talking to a friend saying, "Give me your silver." It's saying, "Hey, do me a favor. Can I have your silver and your gold?" I'm trying to figure out what the underlying point is.
Yeah. And when the Torah describes it happening in real time, the word used is vayinatzlu et hamitzrim, I think, which means they exploited, they despoiled the Egyptians. So it's being set up here as why don't you knock on your neighbor's door and see if they'll give you a parting gift? When it happens more as a forced taking of what belonged to them. I just noticed the T-shirt you're wearing. And this is a 2-line, it's kind of a 1.5 line little mini interlude in the middle of announcing the 10th plague, because even verse 3, which we'll get to next week, it's not clear if it's directly or only indirectly related to verse 2. So it's just kind of stuck in. That goes back to, I think, what Larry was saying before, is who wove this together? And if it was God, right, maybe God needs an editor, as it were. Who did I say was next? I don't remember.
I think you said me. So
okay.
I agree completely with what Norm said in terms of the concept of slavery, but I won't dwell any more on that. I agree with you in terms of how to view this verse. So if God was speaking to Moses while Moses was still standing in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh would not have seen that or heard that because God's speaking in the way that he speaks to Moses, then Moses turns around to the delegation behind him and whispers in their ears and says, "It's time to go and to do this thing." And what's the thing that they're supposed to do is I find it really interesting that it's separate for men and for women, because of course the men would ask for the power tools and the women would ask for the jewelry.
Yeah. You think that it's separated because of the types of things that they would each be taking out of Egypt?
I think that's a nice way of looking at it. I have no idea why it's separated, except I guess the most pashat way of looking at it is this is a job for both men and women. Everybody.
Yeah.
Men and women. I'm surprised they didn't even say children. The children can ask for the toys.
Yeah. Stevie, Rick, were you next?
No, but the women took the musical
anyway.
Instruments.
Okay.
The music for Rashi says they took the musical instruments, right? The timbrels and all that.
Rachel and then Stevie. Mothers go first, Stevie. Sorry.
I'm struck by the notion of going to your neighbor. In the previous plagues, the Israelites had light when Egypt had darkness. And the Israelites did not have hail or did not have locusts when the Egyptians did. So I had this image in my mind of a geographic separation of these communities. And here I'm going to go next door, and the next door neighbor hadn't had light for 3 days. Darkness you can touch, but I had light. It messes with the geographic kind of model I had in my mind.
Right, but particularly if we understood Rhea to be neighbors opposed to peer, because we have been told that the Jews are there in Goshen, the Israelites, and the Egyptians are not, in which case, what does it mean to have a neighbor? Or as Norm was suggesting, maybe Rhea here be just someone that you know in that community, and it's not entirely implausible that there would be people that the Israelites would just know amongst the Egyptians, right? Stevie, Barry, and then Leonard, and then we're going to call it.
In the context here, right, the last plague, the last third negotiation broke down over whether, Pharaoh would let everyone go or just some people. And whether you want to call it a pretense or the actual thing at stake until things escalate is, a short trip, a few days to go worship God. So I think it sort of makes sense for in the, even slaves would perhaps ask for some nice clothing or nice whatever, for a special occasion for, one day or something.
Yeah.
And I think that's the idea. And then V'nat Tzlot Mitzrayim is, the aftermath as to what happened. And of course, in the this pasuk related to the previous pasuk, you have that God's saying, hey, Pharaoh's actually going to send everyone out, and he's going to do it with such gusto that they're not going to take their things back. So like God has this plan in mind, but for the people, there's still this possibility, possibly on both sides of the Israelite Egyptian, interaction, of thinking that this is a special occasion. And
yeah. Thank you, Stevie. Barry, Leonard, and then we'll say Bijantif.
So just to hang on to this staging for our next session next week, that this is all occurring while Moshe is standing before Pharaoh. They both said to each other they'll never see each other's face again, but they haven't parted yet. That's not going to happen until like verse 8 or whatever. In anger, they split. So all this is happening, and so in verse 3, I go back to the metaphor of Moshe's internal phone is speaking with God, saying this is what Moshe is going to tell the people. The problem having in the verse 4, as you suggested, is how are the people there? I mean, Moshe is now telling the people this, but they're not there. Moshe's there with Pharaoh.
Right.
So we'll have to figure that out next time. But all this is occurring on the stage with Moshe before Pharaoh and in his internal phone talking to God.
To which I would say, maybe. We don't know, right? It could be these are two different scenes, and the Torah doesn't give us the stage direction, or it's happening where before Moshe has left Pharaoh's presence. Leonard?
All right, so I just want to say regarding the word yishalu, we've been translating to ask or to ask for these things, but it also means to borrow. Right, and that's exactly how JPS translated that, tell the people to borrow each man from his neighbor and so on. Although, since we're not really planning on returning this stuff, maybe ask for is a better.
It's like we say, can I borrow a tissue?
Yeah. and then the last thing I was going to say over here, that what are we borrowing over here? It says objects of silver and gold. But back in chapter 3, it also throws in clothing. 3:22, it says you ask for you're going to get the gold and the silver and the gold clothing, and you should put the clothing on your children. And what's interesting is that both the Septuagint and the Samaritan text include clothing on this verse.
On this verse,
yes,
right. I forgot that at the burning bush, there is already a reference to this notion that when Exodus finally happens, there's going to be this transfer of wealth. Good, and that's interesting. That those translations include clothing in this verse. Fascinating.
Rabbi, 1235 has the clothing.
1 second, Rick. I wonder if there's an earlier version of the Torah, right? Like Septuagint really thought of itself as a translation. So it's the Septuagint translating from a Hebrew version of our verse that had it, or is the Septuagint thrusting it in there because I wanted to match earlier on? You said the Septuagint and what?
Samaritan text.
Interesting. Yes, Rick.
1235 has the Usmalot again. I was looking ahead. I was wrong about Moses and Pharaoh. But anyway, there it's Kesev, Zahav.
And they were wrong about you.
Usmalot. Usmalot is in 35. 1235.
We'll get there soon enough. Good job, everyone. Chag Sameach. Next week, Tuesday in the Sukkah.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.